Moving along in the first global revolution, we are in chapter 10, and this is part 3. I open up this part with one of these little boxed inserts. True words are not pleasant. Pleasant words are not true. A good man is not a speechifier. A speechifier is not a good man. Thus, a good man is content with being resolved without resorting to force. May he be resolved without pride. May he be resolved without exaggeration. May he be resolved without ostentation. May he be resolved out of necessity. And that is said by Lao Tzu. It is necessary to distinguish carefully between the individual and the collective level. In many cases, they are compatible. The fight against pollution provides a good example. Indeed, the interdependence of nations and the globalization of a number of problems calls for a raising of universal awareness and for a new international ethics. At the collective level, we note a number of new approaches dictated by the pressure of the new facts. The ethics of nature imposed by global environment issues. The ethics of life, exemplified by genetic engineering. The ethics of development, resulting from the increasingly and unbearable gap between the rich and the poor. The ethics of money, because it is divorced from economic realities and dominates the ambitions of too many individuals. The ethics of images, which should rule over the media and modulate the influence of television and excessive dramatization of the image. The ethics of solidarity, dictated by the fact that the dimension of the problems posed to humankind today requires cooperation between human beings as a condition of their survival. A new ethical vision such as this will necessarily have repercussions on the national level. In conclusion, the speed of evolution and of current mutations leads us to consider that the time factor has an ethical value in itself. Every minute lost, every decision delayed means more deaths from starvation and malnutrition, means the evolution to irreversibility of phenomena in the environment. No one will ever know for sure the human and financial cost of lost time. Once this has been said, the ethics of solidarity and of time leads to an ethics of action, where each citizen must feel concerned and mobilized. The isolated individual always feels helpless in the face of immensity of the battle, in the midst of which he is surprised to find himself. This induces individuals to organize and associate to find together the force and the effectiveness which they cannot muster when alone. Collective ethics depend on the ethical behavior of individuals, and it is obvious that inversely, the adhesion of the individual to a set of ethical behaviors can be encouraged, invited, and aroused by the collective approach. How can different traditional and modern collective and individual value systems coexist in a society and at the individual level? The emergence of certain universal values such as human rights or respect for nature does not mean the end of ancestral values. They may contradict each other. In addition, individual values may at times conflict with collective values, or one value may conflict with another. A glaring example is the conflict between the sale of arms, which is a source of profit for a nation and of work for numerous men and women, and yet it is in opposition to the same nation's desire for peace. The harmonious coexistence of very different values is nothing new, but it has been seriously questioned by the rise in fundamentalism. It is rather the relative importance attached to the values that changes according to the age of the ideology or religion in sway. Since each person is biologically and socio-culturally unique, the emphasis should be laid on the individual aspect. Collective values are often the outcome of a choice made, or worse yet, imposed by those holding the reins of power who want at all costs to impose their values by showing contempt for those of others, by even attempting to suppress them. Collective values can be taken into consideration only when there exists true freedom and a high level of culture. Elites everywhere reconcile easily despite the surface controversy. The general public is not involved, only manipulated in debates of this type. The gulf between elite thinking and thinking at a popular level is enormous. Here is where we find distortions and tensions difficult or even impossible to resolve. An interesting and important point is that different value systems do in fact coexist, even though their coexistence is sometimes colored by opposition and mistrust. Indeed, it is not so much a question of the coexistence of contradictory value systems as of the same values being interpreted in different terms. When all is said and done, the factor that makes such coexistence possible, as well as the plurality of interpretations and the society of uncertainty, is the capacity for dialogue and communication. To conclude this brief outlook, we must stress two phenomena that are going in opposite ways. There is indeed a weakening of the moral sense of individuals who feel cheated not only because the ethical structure that used to serve as the reference and to which they willingly submitted has collapsed, but also because the great threats of the contemporary world have frightened them into a chilly self-withdrawal. Simultaneously, there is a productive collective awareness of the great problems of the world, old and new, which is encouraging expectations and research. The spiritual and ethical dimension is no longer an object of scorn or indifference. It is perceived as a necessity that should lead to a new humanism. And this chapter ends with one of these little boxed inserts, and it says, "May the Divine Spirit protect us all. May we work together with great energy. May our study be fruitful and thorough, and may there be no hatred between us." And it says that's from Aum, peace, 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 peace. And this is a Vedic prayer from 3000 BC. And that ends chapter 10. And the next video we will conclude this book with its unnumbered final chapter, Learning Our Way into a New Era.